Abby, are you almost done?
Almost, yeah. End of this week.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to give this just a couple of minutes so that people who are in the waiting room have time to come in. I think it's great to see all these people who are choosing to be on Zoom on a gorgeous day in Maine or wherever you are this beautiful spring Sunday afternoon. I had a Zoom meeting yesterday and I took my laptop outside so I could at least be outside during the workshop. I think that everybody's admitted that is in the waiting room now. So I'll get started. And there will be other people coming in as we go, but that's fine. I want to make sure that our guests today have plenty of time to read because we have a very special program today. So I'm Meg Weston. If any of you haven't gotten to know me yet, welcome to the Poets Corner. If you've been here before, you know, but just for those who might be new, the Poets Corner was established in June of 2020 when we were all sheltered in during the beginning of the pandemic. And Catherine Seitz and I were just desperate to have a bit of community of people that love poetry and prose, writing, reading. And so we established the Poets Corner 3 years ago, and it's really grown since then. We have more than 3,000 people now on our mailing list and regularly attend these usually Sunday afternoon events. And forgive my voice today, I'm just getting over a kind of long viral infection that wasn't COVID, but fortunately beginning to feel better. So there's a lot of that going around too. So today we're celebrating mothers and motherhood and mothering a week before the actual Mother's Day, so that all of you who choose to celebrate Mother's Day in another way will still have an opportunity to do that. We are recording today's event, so if you or somebody has missed it for any reason, you want to share it with friends, it'll be on the website within a day or two at thepoetscorner.org. Want to let you know about a couple of upcoming events on the Poets Corner. On June 11th, we have a reading with Kathleen Ellis and Claire Milliken called Disclosures. And Ellen Goldsmith will co-host that with me. For that event, Kathleen will be reading from her new book, Body of Evidence, and Claire will be reading from 2 books that she's just published in the last 6 months. And they'll be talking about themes that are common between their work and other themes that come up with their work. And they're both wonderful poets. You won't want to miss that. And then the month of June is going to be very busy on the Poets Corner because we're launching the first of our Craft Talk series. And on June 4th, Julie Marie Wade is doing a webinar on hybrid forms, and you can sign up under Craft Talks on the Poets Corner. And that will be followed up 2 weeks later with Frisia McKee doing a workshop laboratory. So you have a chance to experiment with hybrid forms and get feedback on your work. And that will be on June 18th. So look those 2 up on the website. One more thing I want to let you know about, if you're in Camden, Maine, or anywhere near Camden area, I would encourage you to come on May 20th to the Camden Festival of Poetry. It's our very first year doing this. We're very excited about it. Richard Blanco is the keynote speaker for the day. There are, I think, 7 different mini workshop sessions and 6 local mid-coast area poets reading, and musicians and refreshments and a book fair during the course of the afternoon. And in the morning, there's a Poems on Windows walk. So I think it's middle school students do this every year. They write poems and they're beautifully lettered on shop windows around town. And they'll be standing in front of their windows reading their poems that morning. So plan to make a day of it on May 20th if you're anywhere near or can be near the Mid-Coast Maine area. So with that, I want to get started on today's event. And I'm going to just start by introducing Meghan Sterling, because Meghan organized and created this event called Clock of Cream and Flame, Mothers on Motherhood. And I had to look that up. Somebody said, well, where does that phrase come from? And I looked it up to find Sharon Old's wonderful poem, My First Week. So if Meghan doesn't read that, maybe I will later, but one of us will read that great poem, just so you know where that name came from. But Meghan's work is widely published. It's forthcoming in the Los Angeles Review, Rhino Poetry, the Colorado Review, Poetry South, and many others. And it's been nominated for 4 Pushcart Prizes. Her debut poetry collection, These Few Seeds, came out in 2021 and was a finalist for the Eric Hoffer Grand Prize in Poetry. Her chapbook, Self-Portrait with Ghosts of the Diaspora, I guess, Harbor Editions. Her collection, Comfort the Mourners, Everybody Press. And her collection, View from a Borrowed Field, which won the Lily Poetry Review's Paul Nemser Book Prize, are forthcoming in 2023. Well, we're in 2023, so maybe you can fill us in on which of those are available. View from a Borrowed Field. Wonderful, wonderful, Meghan. You might be one of the most prolific poets I know, a wonderful poet who shared her work on the Poets Corner before. And I've also taken a class with her, so she's also a wonderful teacher. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Meghan Sterling.
Hello, welcome. Thank you so much. When I was thinking about this Mother's Day reading, I thought about the women in my life that were mothers who, like me, are constantly recording and processing this experience of being a mother and what it means, and what it means is constantly changing. And so when I was thinking about a name for this event, I found the line from Sharon Old's poem, A Clock of Cream and Flame. And there's something about the clock of cream and flame and also the cadence of that line that made me feel like it captured something of mothering that I was still holding in my body, which was the clock of it, right? This routine, the cream, the sweetness, and the flame, the incendiary emotions, passions, rage, all of it. It just seemed to capture it. And I'm going to introduce my 2 darling friends who are absolutely world-class poets and teachers and incredible human beings. And then I'm going to go ahead and read the poem that line comes from. And then the way we're going to do the reading today is we're each going to read one poem, and we're going to kind of, I call it round robin, right? We move in a circle and we respond to each other. And there's something jazzy about it that I really like, and something really free about it that, and I like following the rhythm and the energy of my co-poets and seeing where things lead us. And so, but before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read their bios. So, I'm
And
first going to
Megan, you might also just want to mention Katherine, who can't be here
Oh,
today.
of course. So, beloved Katherine Hagopian Berry, local Maine poet, amazing human, amazing friend, amazing poet. She and her family are sick with COVID, and so she can't be here today. And it's really, she's deeply missed. But so I'll do alphabetical order. Sonia Greenfield. Sonia Greenfield, they, is the author of 3 collections of poetry, All Possible Histories, which is from Riot in Your Throat in 2022, Let Down, White Pine Press in 2020, and Boy with a Halo at the Farmers Market, Cod Hill Poetry Prize 2015, along with 2 chapbooks, Helen of Troy is High as Fuck, Harbor Editions 2023, and American Parable, Autumn House Press Chapbook Prize 2019. Excuse me. Her work has appeared in the 2018 and 2010 Best American Poetry, Southern Review, Willow Springs, and elsewhere. 1 second. I'm running a retreat right now up in Acadia National Park. Excuse me, and I've been talking my face off, so please bear with me. She lives with her family in Minneapolis, where she teaches at Normandale College, edits the Rise Up Review, and advocates for both neurodiversity and the decentering of the heterogeneous white hegemony. More at soniagreenfield.com. And then Abby E. Murray is the editor of Collateral, a literary journal concerned with the impact of violent conflict and military service beyond the combat zone. Her first book, Hail and Farewell, won the Perugia Press Poetry Prize and was a finalist for the Washington State Book Award. She recently finished her term as the 2019-2021 Poet Laureate for the city of Tacoma, Washington, and relocated to Washington, D.C., where she remotely teaches rhetoric and military strategy to Army War College fellows through the University of Washington. Those are the fabulous poets that I will be reading with today. But first, I will read the poem from Sharon Olds, My First Weeks. This maybe will set the tone. And then after I read this, maybe Sonia, you can follow with something. So we'll see what happens. Okay. My First Weeks by Sharon Olds. Sometimes when I wonder what I'm like underneath, I think of my first 2 weeks. I was drenched with happiness. The wall opened like liquid. My head slid through my legs. I pushed off from the side, soared gently, turned, squeezed out neatly into the cold, illuminated air, and breathed it. Washed off, wrapped, I slept. And when I woke, there was the breast the size of my head, hard and full, the springy droplets of the nipple. Sleep, milk, heat. Every day, she held me up to the window and wagged my fist at my sister down in the street, who waved her cone back at me so hard the ice cream flew through the air like a butter brickle cannonball. Otherwise, it was sleep and milk by day, my mother's by night. The nurses would prop me with the bottle. Paradise had its flaws. Every 4 hours and not a minute sooner I would drink, but every 4 hours I would have the world in my mouth. 2 weeks and then home to the end of the hall, where at night a nurse would give me 4 ounces of water every 4 hours, and in the meantime I shrieked for it. They knew it would build my character, to learn to give up, and I learned it. Dawn and the satiny breasts, the burp, the boiled sheet to be placed on where my sister couldn't touch me. I lay and moved my arms and legs like feelers in the light. Glorious life. And it would always be there behind those nights of tap water the whole way back, that fortnight of unlimited ration, every 4 hours, clock of cream and flame. I have known heaven. Oh,
yeah, such a good poem.
Little Sharon.
Mm-hmm. Sharon the Sharon. Thank you.
Sharon.
So now I'm supposed to follow that up, is what you're
Yep.
telling me.
That's what I'm telling
Oh,
you.
yeah, no pressure, no pressure at
pressure.
all.
Hey,
Okay, so my book, my experience of parenthood, of motherhood, is informed by fertility issues, and it's informed by neurodivergence in my family. So my book, Let Down, is a collection of untitled prose poems. So it actually reads like kind of one long poem. So I will read a poem that is about beginnings. And so I'm sort of taking the Sharon Olds poem and trying to go with that. So this is number 5 from the collection. I can't help but make symbols of them. In the Hall of Birds, for example, we walk the glass walls of wings pinned in static flight, a vole dripping from the mouth of the barn owl. But I'm looking at the common kind for reference. In the backyard, it must have been a nuthatch nest laid to waste the morning I woke to what sounded like a crying dog. It was a blue jay marauding with a shriek, and she left with claws full when all week prior another sat in that camellia's crown, tending what hatched. Or at our cabin, where I carried you through those late winter months, tracking the mating pair of geese. In the dark, after the hatching, they honked their horns of distress, while I birthed a boy in sterile light at 3 a.m. in the wing of a hospital. Then the smell of my own blood lingered for weeks as I counted down the goslings to 0. Back at our cabin in the woods, you bawling as the sun tiptoed into the hollow. It must have been a red-breasted sapsucker that played the metal gutters every dawn, hammering my fatigue home until I begged your father to kill it. The bird's machine gun report answered by shotgun, that resonance still traveling as the crow flies.
thank you.
Thank you.
I miss
Abby,
being able to like applaud. Like I still really feel that missing of hands coming together and applauding wildly, and everyone just kind of swooning after a poem.
Totally.
Also, I really want to point out that Sonia has won so many awards that she choked Meghan Sterling, and I feel like it's really important that we just make a note of that.
Totally. Can't even get them out.
Right? You started choking on
I
all of
totally-
them.
It's what happens. Yeah. Too many awards.
Trying to cover my face.
I love it. I love that both of these poems, I mean, I don't look forward to following up either of them, but I think what I love about them is that they're both looking at times in a life, in several people and creatures' lives that are so widely accepted as ordinary and invisible. The existence of birds around us. Even I've been thinking, I'm just about to move from Washington, D.C. back to Washington State. And I've been really thinking about we live where there's tons of birds. And I'm going to miss the sound of birds. I mean, usually actually when I'm sitting here at my desk, I have to tell people, I'm like, let me know if you can't hear me because the birds are going nuts outside the window. And it's kind of the same with motherhood. With raising a baby, going home with a baby from the hospital, and you're just incredulous that people let you leave the hospital with a tiny human. And it's so ordinary, and yet it, knocks you off your feet. So yeah, I really love that about these poems. I think is that kind of how you're picturing Round Robin, Megan?
Yeah. And now you get to do you.
All right. I think it was really smart of Sonia to talk about how what informs her writing. about motherhood, and mine is probably informed by my proximity to military culture, which is still, my husband is active duty. I'm anti-war and a protester, and that's how we met, and that's how we got married and stayed married. But I'm very close to military culture that's really steeped in, centuries of racism and sexism. And we have one daughter, and she's now 9, even though in a lot of these poems she's 8. But I write often about the proximity that she has now to the sexism that is permeating military culture. So maybe I'll start with reading this poem. And I think so many of us have these poems now. This is called After a Massacre. This morning, she woke up to me sitting beside her, my hand on her lavender pajamaed, still baby belly, a gesture that has calmed her since the day she was born. She is 8, and I'm not certain I will ever feel her abdomen beneath my palm without calling it her tummy, if only to myself, because she has recently discovered she is too grown up to be cute, too sophisticated to go potty, or say, as she used to, that one hand has 4 fingers and 1 flum. And I am not one of those mothers who'd keep her child young forever if she could. I'm not. I am too excited about her adulthood, too invested in her old age, which can also be called her survival in American English. But listen, I'm just trying to reconcile the names of things with things themselves one morning after a massacre. Because perhaps this is the only way to teach my daughter not to speak a language I somehow learned. The one that says massacre is just another word for Tuesday. A tummy is filled with entrails. Prayer is what people say to wish away a slaughter. And comfort is something everyone believes in, but nobody sees. I am wondering how to say it is 7 a.m. and she needs to get up and put on a clean kitten t-shirt, eat her usual bowl of mini wheats, then walk to school and work on her crepe paper goldfish when my teeth and tongue only seem capable of forming 2 words, stay here, stay here. And this is how to say good morning when you really mean it is morning. And this is how to tell a child she's safe every time you remember she is not.
Bam. So good.
I feel like we all have these poems now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So many poems of parental fear. I've been writing poems about being terrified since she was inside of my body. And there were these terrible fires ringing Asheville, North Carolina. And I was pregnant, and the only exercise I could really do was go walk at that point. And I couldn't walk because I couldn't breathe. I'm trying to think if I should read a poem that kind of is similar. I think you know what? I'll just read that poem that your poem just sparked. There's so many. I mean, my daughter is my muse, or motherhood, is my muse. It's just so rich with ambivalence and complicated emotions and our own personal growth and watching our children grow and all of that entails. It's a wild ride. So I'll read this one because and this is a nice short little poem that it just sort of relates well to the one I think you just read. I used to dream you. I used to dream you before you were born. Talked to the swell of my body, the sense I could make of the world. The fires sweeping the west, the forests swallowed along the east, the boundaries we thought were set in rock receding. How I would offer my wisdom aloud to the empty car, play you, excuse me, play you Chopin and Satie and Sibelius without irony, tell you of my travels, sip tea and clink my cup with you quiet inside the stone of my flesh, taste joy in the rain, the reddening leaves, in the small sips of unscorched air when I could get them. How I panicked one day when I couldn't find you, how you were still inside my body, the only place I considered you safe. That's a real story.
Yeah.
I drove away from my house and I was like, oh, she's not in her car seat. And I was like, wait, I'm still pregnant. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
But that's kind of what we do as mothers, right? We're always like thinking ahead. Like, what does my child need? Like, where is she? Where is he? Where is she? Where is they? Where are they? Like, what can I do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now I just like perk up, right? I don't need to be prompted. Is that that's how we're doing this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right, I'm perking up. Here we
Dive in.
go.
Dive in.
Okay. Well, so since we've been kind of moving in that toward that, like how to keep our children secure, and then I'll read a poem from All Possible Histories that's called Lord's Prayer. That sort of touches on that concept. Dear Lord, please grant me a space in the sand on a Tunisian beach with water so blue it makes my eyes ache, and tiny crabs that tickle the length of my neck, of my legs, but never pinch, and a novel in my hands about a woman whose regrets match mine, but who finds contentment on a swatch of beach in Tunisia, where she reads of sadness much like her own, yet moves on. Dear Lord, all I ever ask for is a dog who will live forever, one who will rescue my only son from wells, from the waves of an ocean that cares little for what it sucks in or spits out, from the spiteful girlfriend who breaks his 5 prized possessions because the boy could never sniff out her cruel streak. Dear Lord, please let me finally write the one poem that will bring peace to the Middle East. Oh Lord, I ask these simple things of you here in an American town, far from a Tunisian beach, my best dog dead almost a year, and my child only as tangible as hard sun on unfeeling waves, where the glare brings tears to my eyes as I ask for your mercy. Amen.
Mm. Mm.
That is so good. And that's such a great prompt too. I mean, just listening to you read that, I was like, I want to go write a poem that, repeats Dear Lord and asks this, being for whatever I need. So many different poets could write that way, just saying, Dear Lord, all I ask is, and Jesus Christ, a dog that never dies. I want one.
Mm-hmm. The true story about that is that I wrote that poem in one of those really super loud indoor playgrounds, like sort of like a Chuck E. Cheese type of place, where I was taking my only child so that he could socialize with other children. And I tucked myself into a little corner and said, well, I'm going to write a poem. And I
Wow.
did it. So
I love it.
Awesome.
Who knew that poems could grow in like Chuck E. Cheese,
Yeah.
really.
I love it. Trying to think what would feel like all of your voices are so distinct, and I don't know how to follow any of these up. I'm gonna read this poem actually from, 'cause it's so beautiful. Look at this, the issue of Mom Egg Review that just came out not too long ago. And I'm super excited that I'm got a poem into it. So I'm gonna read this. I write a lot of poems about the things that my daughter says, because I mean, everyone knows kids are absolutely hilarious. And they're also, you know, more philosophically aware than adults. I think definitely more than we give them credit for. And this is, I never made a baby book for May or any of that kind of stuff. I'm not good at, Shutterfly or photo albums. I'm not crafty. But I do write poems that capture what May has said. Like, I remember she was like 4 years old and she was in the back of the car and we were driving and she had just done something. She'd made a bad choice and we were talking about choices, and she was like, everyone makes mistakes, Mom. And I was like, yep, that's true. And she was like, you make mistakes. Dad makes mistakes. Even Obama made mistakes. I was like, definitely needs to go into a poem. This is a 4-year-old kid just saying this. It's hilarious.
Awesome.
So this poem is called Heirloom, and it is about something that my daughter said again while we were driving. I'm driving while talking to my 8-year-old about how even good people can be jerks sometimes. And there's a pause. Then she asks from her booster seat in the back, but how come you've never been a jerk? And the question is a cluster of jewels I can carry on my collarbone. My daughter's belief that I am too good to ever be unkind. Because for her, in this moment, on this day, I am. Reader, I have plans for this memory. Why not take it home to save for later? Keep it in the box beneath my bed until the first time she swears she hates me, her words choking the house like oily smoke. Then I can dig through my heirlooms for this, the way she loved me when she was 8 and I was incompatible with fault. I'll fasten it at the soft of my throat, that well from which countless wrong words have sprung since before she was born. And I'll shine, if only for myself, still visible in the dark.
Mm. Yes.
Wouldn't that be great if we could just take what our kids say and take what they do that's absolutely beautiful and just like, put it in a jar and like take it out later when they're like, I hate you. And you could just be like, smells like denial.
Totally. I feel like that's what a lot of, for me, the poetry is too. Like I'm recording all of this beauty to keep. I am my father-in-law, one of my father-in-laws told me once that you don't remember, like the first 10 years of your kid's life, you don't remember. And I see the truth in it. My daughter didn't sleep for 4 years. And so those first 4 years are really weird in terms of how I remember them. And all of these poems I write are a way to kind of hold on to things that I feel like time would sweep away from me. Mm-hmm. And you've inspired me to read a poem that I wrote. So my daughter also says amazing things. So something that she says that really resonated with me was, and I think she's still doing it occasionally, but she would call a person a people. So like if we were on a walk along the beach and there was a person like walking, she'd be like, Mama, a people, or like, it's a people. I'm a people. You're a people, that's a dog and I'm a people. And I was like, this is so good. And, she's not going to say this forever. I'm going to write a poem about this. And so I did. And also like what it felt like to me, it kind of meant, right? Like we contain multitudes, right? So I wrote this poem and it is called My Daughter Calls a Person a People. So my daughter calls a person a people. And each of us is hiding populations. Each is a plural noun, one in the many, many in the one. How many people am I? How many stones are skipped across the surface of the sea? Nearly every night, I hold someone long dead close to my ear to hear them breathe out sea like a shell. How many dead am I? How many do I still remember as children who are now stone quiet, resting at the bottom of the sea? My daughter and I walk the beach some weekends, and she counts the stones we find on the shore. There are 5, 6, 7. She slowly counts to 100, each number something new in her mouth. 100. There are 100 stones, 100 selves, 100 people behind our eyes. My grandmother stares from a passing car. My father from the mirror when my face is bare. The girl that hid her acne behind her hands in the bluing dark, weeping at the sight of her face. The girl who dreamed she was a poet. The girl who couldn't imagine having a baby. The woman who desperately wanted one. My daughter and I count the stones we throw into the waves. When we get to 100, we start over. Yeah. Well, you're muted, love.
I know. I'm staying at a B&B, and somebody in the kitchen was just running the blender, so I thought maybe I would mute myself while that was going on. You didn't need to hear that. I was saying that I love these sort of documented moments, and they remind me of the the old films that people used to take of us, and then you've got like that poem right there is like a film that you can take out and reread to sort of recapture that moment. So yeah, that's really great. Okay, so I guess I'm gonna read something that I wasn't planning on reading, but since we're sort of riffing off of each other's poems. So my son is autistic, and he struggled, like a lot of autistic people do, with language when he was younger. But sometimes he would say things that were so funny, and he would also like borrow, we all learn how to use language for ourselves, but for some autistic people, they will sort of verbatim borrow things that they've heard and use those phrases to articulate what they're thinking or how they're feeling, because it's easier and sometimes than trying to string their own words together to articulate what they mean. In any case, so I'm going to read number 54 from Let Down. And it's just kind of a litany of things that my son said when he was very little. And this book is written to to him. People have described it as like a Valentine to my son. So the you is him. You say, I don't want to calm down. I want to calm up. I say, I need you to be patient. And you say, being patient is not available. You say, I'm upset because my other nostril ran out of batteries. I say, you're cute and I love you. And you say, I'm cute and I love you too. You say, when I grow up to be a flying pest, I'm going to guard your apples. You say, when I was a baby, I had cutie marks. And I say, and now you have beauty marks. And you say, I have buta marks because I'm beautiful. You say, I coughed up my tummy. You say, does this splinter make me look fat? I ask, what do you want for breakfast? And you say, I want silver linings for breakfast. I say, I love you. And then I ask, don't you want to say I love you too? And you say, I'm loading, Mama. You have to wait. You say, Mama, I want to drink a case of you.
Mm.
I love it.
Me too. It's so good we're doing this,
Mm-hmm.
holding on to all this.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just sharing it, it makes me think like, why don't I do this, once a month or once a quarter with poetry friends, get together and say, let's read poems about motherhood, or even let's read poems about, let's read our angry poems and get together and share them, like how healing this can be. That's really amazing.
Mm.
I think I'm going to read something too that I wasn't planning on reading, that was sort of sparked by Sonia's poem. I have a lot of poems for May. I should probably publish this before she's like old enough to get pissed, or but this particular poem I keep thinking, oh, this would make a perfect chapbook, but now it's grown so much. I think it would be bigger. And this is called Survival Skills. My daughter is she's having a hell of a time in elementary school, and I know that teachers are overburdened, underpaid, and there's a lot to expect from them, but my daughter is just facing so much resistance from teachers saying, no, don't be creative this way, just take the test. And so that's been really a challenge for the past couple of years. And she's just now starting to realize that language is really something that she can hold on to, and something that can't be taken away from her. And so this poem is called Survival Skills. I've told my daughter spelling matters, that her appreciation for the anatomy of language has been an emergency since she was born. But it isn't until her teacher tells their class to write one sentence about how to make the world a better place, and she raises her hand to ask for help spelling two words, destroy and patriarchy. And her teacher says that's not what she meant. She meant something like more cupcakes or extra toys. And this girl, the one I call mine, who cannot yet write what she means, finds herself caught between knowing and not knowing what to write on her page, which is hers and not hers at all, not yet. And I'm not there, but it's possible she finally understands what I mean when I say the capacity to sew her own letters together alone, to build her voice from a mess of sounds and symbols, even as they are being distributed, withheld, stolen, mythologized, revered, and restricted, is truly a survival skill.
Love it.
Yeah, that's good.
Love it.
Mhm.
Love it. Oh, so wonderful. Yeah, my daughter, she's really little still. She's 6, recently 6, but she's little, like there's a littleness there, and she's holding on to that littleness.
Yeah.
Which is really a mixed experience. Like, she's my only child. She's the only child I'm going to have. And so there's part of me that delights at the littleness. But then, of course, I also want for her to like embody herself, and that will come when she's ready. For now, she likes to pretend she's a baby, and I don't want to shame her for that. And I also secretly, maybe not so secretly, delight in that she still is clinging so close to me. But so recently I was in New York City and I was hanging out with some younger folks. And one of them, who has become a close friend of mine, asked me, would you like to have another child? And I was like, oh, hold on. And we were at a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown in New York. And I went down to like the basement bathroom and I just cried. And then I went back to my the apartment I was staying in and I wrote this poem. And so this poem is called When the Young Woman Asks Me If I Would Like to Have Another. And I see my silvering hair. And I remember the steering wheel in my hands, its worn black leather, grasping until my fingers emptied of blood whenever I saw one, yawning, sucking on its fingers, floating on a father's chest, haloed by thin wisps of hair, sleeping in a mother's arms, in a carriage, in a wagon, in a car carrier, draped in cloth. The desire to look so hard that the sight would remain like a stain. Some days the want was like thirst. Some days like heat, but not anymore. The want has grown quiet. The want knows it cannot. Not soft, not scent, not tears in my mouth that aren't my tears, not my tears in her mouth where her mouth meets my body like the horizon line of sky meeting the sea, not nights like rocking on a wave-tossed ship, not spit and drool and shit and vomit and applesauce and milk, all the milk, milk-soaked sheets, milk-soaked shirts, the curdled smell of my flesh stinking with its supple reek, the sour smell of her mouth like last week's cream, not mornings in the bath to wash off our sweat, not warm baths rubbing my fingers over her mouth, her pink, toothless mouth, her gummy mouth, the give of her flesh in my mouth, the pulp of her, the squash of her, the kiss of her, the sweet stink of her, the sweet I got that I greedily took and took and took and prayed that it would end, and weep now it has ended.
Yeah, that was accurate, and I love the sort of the spell you were casting with the repetition in that, because it is like a spell. The desire is like a spell, and then at some point it breaks. I flew from Minneapolis to Orlando, and the number of toddlers getting on that plane made me very happy to not have a small child that I was trying to fly with, because there were families flying with multiple small children. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to go read my New Yorker in my seat. So, but I'm going to follow that with a poem that does speak to the desire that you mentioned there. I have one son and tried and failed a couple more times for another child. It was age related, you know. We all think that we might be able to be the, well, not all, but some of us think we might be able to be the statistic that beats the odds. And then we learn that we're not, and that we're kind of just like everybody else. So this poem is called My Very Last Miscarriage Poem. And the title runs into the poem itself. My very last miscarriage poem wants to remind you that when you get to the innermost matryoshka, it's a baby. This last poem of poems is its own kind of loss as the last of anything. I could cry for my last miscarriage poem, which wants to remind you that I have grown comfortable with the quiet of my single and singular child, who sometimes has needs as hungry as a baby's. This last and most specific loss poem says he needs every ounce of my attention anyway, because he is in love with the prettiest girl in 6th grade. And I know what it means to nurse the unrequited. The last miscarriage poem tells you that I have aged into a feeling akin to acceptance, that if others have what I always wanted, the flame of my rage sputters, nearly out of fuel. The end note, this losing of loss, says, don't worry, I'm good now. I keep gratitude on speed dial. I'm in touch with every hollow I harbor. This final missive makes of itself a raft of bark, and I take the layette gifted for good luck and fecundity, patterned in spring green and smattered with dragonflies, and I set it into the center of the raft. I strike a match and catch at the ribbons twisting in the wind. Then I push the effigy into the center of a lake where we can both watch it burn without hiding our eyes.
Whenever, when people will say like, what is a good poem? And, we all have like a different idea of what a good poem is. Like for me personally, a good poem is one that makes me want to go write immediately. And Sonia, your poems always make me feel like I need to go and write. I want to go write my last miscarriage
Same.
poem,
Yeah.
Same with the Dear Lord. I need to go stop and create. So that is brilliant. I think it's so strange to talk about infertility, especially just in the past year in the United States. It's been things have continued to change, I think, for the worse. And my husband and I struggled for 4 years to have our daughter, and I don't want any more. I grew up with 5 sisters, and we were raised by a single mom. I was one of her biological daughters, and she also adopted several girls as well. And I knew that I wanted to have one daughter. And now I'm like living in this terror of, God, what's going to happen? And I think it's a terror that a lot of women are living under. So I was raised by my mother, who I'm very close with her now. We have a great relationship. I wasn't so close with her when I was a teenager because I was just an asshole, I was like perfecting the art of assholery, which I think is, something that it's like a prereq for teenagers. And but I'm very close with her now. And I wrote a poem for single moms. I often, because my husband's in the military and because he's gone, I'm used to being married to someone who's gone at least 6 months of the year. And so I'm often single momming it, even though I'm not single. I mean, if I have an affair with anyone, it's going to be a private cabin. That's going to be my next love.
Totally.
So I wrote a poem about Father's Day, because I think Father's Day and Mother's Day can be really difficult for a lot of us. And this poem is called How to Be Celebrated on Father's Day, particularly for people who don't feel they fit that traditional mold of father. How to be celebrated on Father's Day. They'll say you ought to be a man, but they say that every day, not just today. And they say it with words and without, making you wait longer in line, ignoring your calls, dismissing your blurred vision or blood. You can do anything, bleeding. On Father's Day, they'll expect you to cook with fire. Remind yourself that you've been leaning over flames as long as anyone, but if burgers sound good, go ahead and brush off the grill. There is nothing confusing about charcoal, propane, knives, or a hungry mouth, just as there is nothing unknowable about engines, a light switch, or giving away what you've earned. Drink a beer full of bubbles or don't. Opt for scotch or don't. But at some point, sip like the king you are today. Like each swallow is a toast to your mental health and fatherhood practiced by each of us, singers of lullabies, the bone weary and brave. My dear father mothers, father figures, people who care what happens. Our shoulders still perfect for piggyback rides and crying. Our generosity ungendered and informed by more than parenthood. I raise my glass to hands that fold and bathe and braid, eyes that stay open far too long so that someone else can rest. Any father worth a family will say, it's your day, you deserve it.
Wow. Wow. Megan, I know that you have to slip off to another commitment here at 5 o'clock. So I just wanted to step in and just say how quickly this hour has passed for me.
Totally.
It's just been wonderful hearing your poems and hearing you react to each other and talk about all these complex feelings of motherhood. So before you slip away, we'll continue to answer questions from the chat and have a little bit of a conversation after you leave. But are there any words you'd like to say before you have to go?
Can I read one last poem?
Sure, that'd be great.
So something that has come up a lot for me since I've become a mother, and Abby spoke to this when she was mentioning her own relationship with her mother, is how healing it can be to become a parent in terms of your relationship with your own parents and with your grandparents. And for me, I named my daughter after my grandmother, who I was very close to. And there's been, since becoming a parent, I've felt a physical connection to my ancestors in ways that I never would have imagined. And I wrote this poem out of this sensation of connection with the past, in the present, and the future. It's called Full Circle, and it's in this collection, View from a Borrowed Field, from Lily Poetry Press, which came out in March. Full Circle. A poem came to me once, but it skirted the sheet covering my grandmother's legs. How I clasped her feet to warm them between my hands. But they didn't yield like they had on Saturdays when I used to rub her feet with lavender lotion while she beamed in gratitude. Now it's 12 years since her death, since she pushed the air away as if to make room for her flight. Not that she believed in such things as flight or souls or heaven, but the way she looked at me as I rubbed her legs, I see again in my daughter's face when I've spent all night with her, holding her hand for hours, although my arms falls asleep and aches as if shot. She is so grateful. In the morning, she holds my face in her hands with a tenderness sharp as cracks on the surface of an egg. This morning, I almost couldn't bear it, loving her that much, being that loved. having her look into my blurry face and see sunshine and snowfall, which is to say everything she thinks is magic, and how I ached knowing that change is coming for us fast as a bullet. And then I remembered the poem I didn't write on my grandmother's deathbed, and I saw that it had returned, that it is always returning. In the way my grandmother's hands pushed at the air as though conducting music, in the way my hands tried to warm her feet, in the way my daughter now holds my face in her delicate hands, and I then hold her face in my clumsy ones. How my daughter's face is everything I never thought I would have again. The love I felt so long ago, staying bright enough to light another and another and another.
Mhm.
Wow, beautiful poem, Megan. Thank you. I love that
Thank
full
you.
circle, that feeling of full circle. And I just love that. I'm not a mother, and I love this reading on motherhood, because we all have a mother and we all have these experiences of motherhood and with the people that are close to us, and so they all resonate in such beautiful, beautiful ways. And I was thinking a lot about the history of writing poems about the domestic things and motherhoods, and how that's wasn't always accepted. That really, I think it's more about the 70s and Anne Sexton and others, and they referred to it as confessional poetry. But today's New York Times had an article about Annie Ernaux winning the Nobel Prize, not in poetry, not for poetry, but all of what she talked about, that feminine experience and the amount of misogyny that it has, inspired and come at her since winning the Nobel Prize. It's just, it floors me. And so I have a question, because it feels like motherhood is a muse for all of you. Megan, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
And yet it's not always the accepted topic to talk about. And how do you think about that? And what is your experience of that? Do you feel it's universal?
I feel like it should be.
Yeah.
I feel like there was a period of time where I was worried about writing mommy poems, but now I don't give a rat's ass. Kind of like I'm going to write what moves me about motherhood. And if those poems find the people who need them, then that's the whole intention, really. But like, I think there's a people out there who are looking for poems that talk about the intimate experience in a public way. So yeah.
Mhm.
So I didn't mean to be glib about your question. It was a really good question, but I was sort of I have to write the things that matter to me, and even if it reaches 5 of my mother friends and makes them grateful for their experience as a mother or whatever, then those poems have done the work that they needed to do.
And I don't think that's glib at all, Sonia. And I also think that it's the way you've each written about it. It's not sentimental. It's not idealized view of motherhood. It's all of it.
Mhm. Yeah. I agree. I was gonna say too, I just started reading this book. I don't know if anyone has heard of it. It just came out last week. I don't remember the last time I got a book on the day it came out and like started gobbling it up immediately. But it's called Monsters: A Fan's Dilemma, and it's by Claire Dederer. And it is looking at how we consume art, especially art that is created by assholes, throughout history. And so, she talks about Hemingway and Picasso, and but she's also talking about women artists. And she was like, when I wanted to talk about women artists, really the most monstrous thing that women could do was to not nurture, a failure to nurture. And so I was just reading this chapter last night, so sorry. And she was talking about Anne Sexton and Doris Lessing, and so this is very like fresh in my mind. And so much of it is that we don't talk about, and we do see motherhood and poems that acknowledge motherhood, or parenthood, or the body, or death. We see them as other, like these poems that need to be kept in a separate room. And it's just another way of telling people to shut up. And I'm like, swear to God, I turned 40 and I was like, I'm not going to shut up anymore. So it's like, I'm not going to shut up anymore. If I want to write a mom poem, I'm going to write a fucking mom poem. And so that's what I'm doing. And that's what I like. And seems to be going over well. I'm just sick of othering poetry and saying, well, you write this and it's other, it's not a real poem and stuff. So I'm over it.
Good for you. And I think your daughter's got that message.
Yeah, she has at least. Yeah.
What was I going to say? Oh, what's the name of the book? So, or maybe you could put it in the chat.
Yeah, I'm going to put it here.
And while you're doing that, I have a couple of questions that have come through, but one that is really intriguing to me. What do you think your kids think about your poetry now and might think about your poetry later on when they're a little older? That's about them.
That's a good question. And plus our kids are like, I think our kids in particular have a lot in common, but they're also very different. Well, I guess that describes every fucking kid on the planet, but still, like, I think my daughter, I mean, she loves it now, but I'm convinced that if my daughter is going to rebel, she's going to do it by, voting Republican and, like being, I don't think she's going to rebel by hating my poetry. But I think she loves it for now, but she's also 9. And she is also convinced that I'm famous because I have published a book. And I've tried to tell her that I am not, and she doesn't believe me. So she's still, I mean, she's young enough to she just adores me still. And I'm like clinging to this as long as I possibly can, because I know the hatred and resentment is coming. But right now she just adores me. And so anything I write, she's like, just flattered that she's showing up. But I don't know, what's it like for Dexter?
And do you edit what you write because you're thinking about that day that she might? No, great.
Not yet.
So Dexter's 14, and I'd say sometime within the past year, I've become the most annoying person in the world. I don't know, I feel like it happened overnight, but like, I just irritate him so much these days. And yet, he still loves me and, will express those things. But if the person he loses patience with first is me. So yeah, it's coming, just saying it's coming. But I think, I don't know, he knows that I write these poems. He knows about this book, but because this book has nothing to do with robots or geography or human anatomy and physiology or astronomy, he kind of doesn't care, because he's very focused on the things that he's focused on. But one of the things that I hope he recognizes when he gets older is that I was writing from a place of advocacy for neurodivergence. And I'm hoping that when he gets to an age where he might want to see what it's about, he'll see that I was advocating for his and many others' right to take up space on this earth and to be their own original selves and not need to mask who they are. So that's my hope for
And
yeah.
has he ever had any interest in writing poetry himself?
No,
That's not.
it's that other part of his brain really that's super active these days. That sort of he's like deep science nerd. So yeah.
How about you, Abby, with your daughter? Does she
Yes.
want to write?
Yeah, she loves to write. She loves writing poems. It's just National Poetry Month, and unfortunately, her teacher really dislikes poetry. She's in 3rd grade, and she taught all these kids that she doesn't like poetry, but they're going to do it because they have to. And she told my kid that what she's writing is not poems because it's too long. And I was like, I just want to walk in there and be like, I have so many texts that I can talk about with 3rd graders about, your poems can be long. Okay. You can swear in your poems and you can write poems about cartoon characters. Guess what? So she loves to write, and I'm so glad that she's not tripping at all over these obstacles being set in front of her. She's just like, nope, and jumps over it. And I'm just like, yes.
That's great. I was watching a documentary the other day on Ruth Stone. Do you know?
Binghamton.
Wonderful, wonderful. And her whole family and her grandkids and her great grandkids, she's like 90 something years old in this scene. And the littlest, like maybe 3 or 4 year old, is reciting poetry. I know poems, she says. And it was just so delightful to see that, that love and enjoyment throughout the generations.
Yeah. I love to see that.
What was I looking at something? Somebody says, what if the hatred and resentment doesn't come? My daughter's almost 23. We had some annoyance, but not the hatred and resentment.
I hope that it doesn't come. And I think that it doesn't always have to. I think I'm just biased because I watched all my sisters and I go through resentment for different reasons. I felt like I was constantly being silenced by my mom, who just wanted me to stop stealing the screens off of City Hall or stop. I kept stealing curbs. I would take curbs and like flower pots from outside of City Hall. It's so stupid. And she just wanted me to stop that. And I was like, you're trying to silence me. So I think it doesn't have to happen, the resentment. And I'm so glad to hear about relationships that are just strong from the start and just stay strong. Hopefully I can do that with my
well, somebody's sharing that happens. Didn't happen to me, and it was probably one of the reasons I decided not to be a mother after all that work, to have these kids be so obnoxious as teenagers like I was. Another question that came up is some of you have used your child's language, kid language, as a prompt in a way to write about, or just your observations of the child. And do you have any prompts or tips you might want to share with other people about how to do that?
I feel like all Sonia's poems are prompts.
I can't think of a specific prompt, but I mean, if you have things that your kids have said, you can just be in conversation in poetic conversation with those things. I mean, that could be kind of a fun thing to do, because that's sort of what Meghan did with her people poem. She sort of got entered into a conversation with her daughter's sort of way to express what a person is. So, yeah.
It's great. Words or language as prompts can be wonderful. I listened to a wonderful poem yesterday called Anyways, all about, using the word anyways instead of anyway, and how it meant so much more. And it was a regional expression. And Megan's poem about people reminded me all of that poem. We hold so much more inside, and a word can mean more than we take it to mean, I guess. But we have a request that we might wrap up with a few more poems, and I think that's a lovely idea.
Yeah.
You guys want to just read one or two more poems? And
Sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna let my cat out because he's driving me nuts.
Okay.
So you start.
Then I can read a poem. She mentioned Ernest Hemingway, and so I have a poem where the title is "For Sale, Baby Shoes Never Worn," and there's a implied narrative to "For Sale, Baby Shoes Never Worn," but I don't like the narrative that's implied, so I gave it my own narrative. Because I can often be speculative with my poetry. I can rewrite the world the way I want it to be. So this poem is called "For Sale, Baby Shoes Never Worn." You think you know the story, but you don't. My baby was born tentacled. 4 legs and 2 arms taper to tips. A hybrid form you might call freak. His cupid bow lips harden like a beak just before he cries. Golden hued, black slits darken his eyes. I met his father in a cave, but before the ink could clear, all his arms were pulling me near. Yet I wanted him ever since I dropped into the deep, my breath drawn from a tank, him like shadows through water, like dreams flowing through sleep. So no shoes for this boy who reaches up from my breast, his missing hands blessed by every tiny cup that puckers up and suctions a kiss from my lips. His 2 tendrils curl around my smitten face, but it's just like any other child's embrace.
oh, that's lovely.
Now I'm especially thinking about these in terms of, what are our kids going to think later? I hadn't thought about that while we were reading it first, but now it's on my mind. I want to check in with your kid in a few years and see what he thinks.
He's like, wow, you really are weird. I mean, I kind of thought you were weird when I was younger, but I've read some of your poetry and yep, that confirms it. So yeah,
I love it.
Well, speaking of multiple arms, I'm going to read this poem that I just wrote. So I write a poem a week, a poem and an essay a week. And I send it to a group of friends by Friday at midnight. And I've been doing this since 2016. Started as a way to get through faculty meetings on Friday afternoons. And this is last week's poem that I wrote. So I'm always telling students, I'm like, read something new, like, bring new stuff. Poetry does not have to be perfection or polished or published to still be a poem. So I'm going to read this, even though I guess you could still consider it a draft. I was able to go to the Museum of Asian Art, the Smithsonian downtown, and it was pouring. So we parked like right outside the museum. It was incredible. And I was there with some friends who are also military spouses. And, we'd been talking about the the incredible amount of emotional labor and domestic labor that we do, largely in part because of our husband's work. And one of my friends saw this particular sculpture, and it is Pranya Paramita, and she's the goddess of, well, it translates to the perfection of wisdom. She has 22 arms. She has 11 heads. She's personified as a mother in particular, not just, so I was along with it because she's the goddess of wisdom. And then I read the next bit and it was because she is void of self. And it was the void of self that I was like, like that, like I couldn't get that out of my head. It was like a splinter after I saw it. So I've been thinking about that, of pouring oneself out for motherhood. So this is called the perfection of wisdom. Although she is more state of being than historical figure, I stand before her 13th century copper likeness, posed inside a cube of light at the Smithsonian. Pranya Paramita, Sanskrit for the perfection of wisdom. She of 11 heads stacked one on top of the other. She of 22 arms, the better to carry, give, or repair what has grown heavy, lacking, or shattered around us. Of course it is she, no matter how much I wish it wasn't. Of course she is, according to ancient texts, mother of wisdom through emptiness, becoming void of self, a metaphor for motherhood only the delusional and ultra-wealthy will deny. This isn't the first time I've brought my daughter to the museum, told her not to break anything, then let her wander off until we both find nothing more extravagant than an hour of making our own choices. The indulgence of having ourselves to ourselves in an era that would rather we strive to be rid of us. I am teaching her to know she is not an idea that must shed her body to become valuable. And sure, this means I am not enlightened, maybe not even wise, but there is goodness in what I want, so I want it. My two hands, empty at the moment, offering gifts to no one. My eyes, the only pair I have, facing forward, seeing what they see without dying to see more. I'm done praying for strength that erases me. The mother of wisdom sprouts so many arms she appears winged, as if she would fly from her perch if she wasn't contained by glass in a windowless room. And I imagine her releasing all the lotus flowers, swords, and prayer beads she's been carrying for us to marvel at the weight of her embodied self.
Yeah. Damn straight.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was unmuted. I was just saying, I love that line that somebody wrote in the chat. I am done praying for strength that erases me. It's a wonderful poem.
Yeah. I feel like so often moms are taught, go above and beyond, exhaust yourself, stretch yourself too thin. And, to an extent, we all have to do that. I think all people have to do that for others. But there's a line, I think, where moms especially are pushed too far and encouraged too far.
Yeah.
And sometimes without a choice,
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, I think we have time for one more from each of you. And then if there's any, if you want to put in your chat, I know Sonia put one of her books in the chat that somebody requested, but if you want to put others in the chat, or if you want to send them to me afterwards, I usually send out a note to everybody who registered for the reading that really tells them when the recording is up. And I'm happy to send out any information, follow-up information you'd like me to send about your books or poems or where they've appeared, because just wonderful poems you've been sharing with us today.
Thank you.
So why don't you read us out with each reading us one last poem? And
Okay.
before you read us out, I will invite everybody to come back June 11th for disclosures with Kathleen Ellis and Claire Milliken, to check out the craft talks on the Poets Corner. If you're in the Mid-Coast, to come to the Camden Festival of Poetry on May 20th, or even Tuesday night, there's a wonderful, I think 6 of us reading at the Camden Library. So with that, I'll let you read us out.
Okay. So I've been told in the past that my work is inherently maternal, and that probably happened, after I became a mother. But I feel like there is something that triggered an urge to mother beyond my individual family, this sense of caring a lot about stuff that isn't necessarily related to me. I don't know. So I'm going to read a poem that is sort of I guess maybe a more political poem about motherhood, and it's informed by the Flint, Michigan water crisis, and this is called Yours. Suppose he was yours who saw rust at first turn of the green wheel handle, your yard slicked down, sprinklers ticking away days meted out in trips to 7-Eleven and the community pool. Suppose he was yours who saw brown, waited for it to run clear, then drank down the whole metallic feel of it from the copper end of a hose. Summer spread before him like a growing puddle. Suppose he was yours who bathed in the river of your tub, scratched until his skin oxidized, flaking off in his sheets. Suppose you saw pinpricks of his blood, but washed those sheets in the same water anyway. Suppose they said, boil it, and you did, but that only made it worse. Suppose he was yours who was told his anger will fleck and spread unchecked, was told bits of heavy metal will damn his lobes. Suppose he was yours who was tested and told he will lose himself in a wash so sick everyone already knew you couldn't eat the fish caught there. Suppose he said, I'm just going to be stupid anyway. What would well up in you? And where would that poison run to?
Wow, powerful poem.
Thank you.
Yes. Damn. Sorry, I feel like whenever I hear a new poem, I'm kind of useless for it, usually for like several minutes at least after I hear it. And so to just move on is kind of feels sort of unnatural.
It's a hard poem to move on from too.
It is, yeah. Where would
Yeah.
that poison go? I just gave a poem of mine to a representative when I went to go hear her speak downtown, and I was like, I should have brought so many poems. I should have been throwing paper airplanes the whole damn time, like just, and I'm gonna send you this one, this one. And that's one of them that needs to be given. Yeah, damn. I'm going to read the poem called At the Nationals Game. The Nationals is the baseball team here. And I just recently went to a baseball game for the first time in many years, actually. And it was kind of incredible. You know how they have those announcers who wander through the seats and like play games with people. And a lot of them were really kind of sexist. And I was like, really, we're doing this? Like, this is out in the open? Like, no one's seeing this? So this is called, and my daughter was having none of it. Of course. So this is called At the Nationals Game. They're playing the Cubs, who open the first inning with 2 runs and a sense of certain victory before the fight's been fought. A commentator roams the stands, playing games with fans, mostly women, who must guess whether an eggplant will float when dropped in a bin of water, or identify the medical term on a list of 3 possibilities: dynode, pertussis, ephus. The commentator asks how they get it right every time. He is in awe, incredulous as a $10 hot dog, true as a mile of green turf. The woman who knows an eggplant will float shrugs, says she's a marine engineer, which is funny because this means the commentator has chosen the wrong woman to play with. And when he extends the mic toward the woman who knows what pertussis is, she just nods at the baby asleep in her lap, which the commentator sees without seeing, because what do fancy words have to do with babies who can't talk? The only place I was ever asked to breastfeed elsewhere was a baseball game in Scranton, minor leagues, and I let an usher, a retired firefighter named Bill, walk me to a first aid closet, where I breastfed in a wheelchair between the defibrillator and a duffel stuffed with gauze, because I was too exhausted and sore to understand what I was being told. Definitely too spent to suggest that Bill go pound sand while I saved my daughter's life using only my tits. Baseball games, it occurs to me now, 8 years later, are strange places for anyone other than men to sit, drink, and applaud, as if the entire stadium isn't an open mitt waiting to snap shut around your pop fly of a life. The loudspeakers at the Nationals game are blasting Charlie Daniels, who wishes there were more rednecks present to solve our problems, if problems are those with more salt on our tongues than day-old pretzels. What this world needs, Charlie says, is a little more respect for the Lord and the law and the working man. And Charlie, I got to tell you, I'm familiar with the fear you think the world is missing, but I ain't going to lead you to the place intimidation goes to die, no matter how many times you call me intellectual or say there ain't nothing you can do. I'm pounding $20 Stellas. I'm rooting for the original home team, the engineers and mothers of pastimes that matter. I'm rooting for the ball from gravity's point of view. I'm rooting for my daughter in the stands with me, reading her book, ignoring the fact that she is live on the Jumbotron, because isn't it funny how much she doesn't care, the way she glances up, away from the camera, visibly annoyed at anyone who tells her where to look.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
great. That's great. What a wonderful poem to end on. Abby, Sonia, thank you so much. This has just been a delightful time. Your vulnerability, your sharing, your language, all of that coming together has just given me, and I'm sure everybody just looking through the chat, such a wonderful afternoon, Sunday afternoon.
Thank you
And
so
I
much.
want to share it with everybody I know before Mother's Day. So thank you.
Thank you. It was so fun. It was so edifying to hear everything's work.
Thank you for having us.
All right.